Welcome to episode 9 of the Order and Chaos podcast. Right, this month, I thought, because it's Pride Month, and I'm sick to fucking death of hearing about this LGBTQ and the influence, the toxic influence it has on society, that I would do a counter narrative, or that we would do a counter narrative. So June is officially or unofficially the month of toxic masculinity. So the podcast this month are going to be based on the tenets of toxic masculinity. Now, so far we've only got one.
And I still
what?
I still don't know what it is this week.
So this is the first podcast of June. Last week, what happened last week?
We're going to try and get all 10 in it month.
I think we could do, if this one goes all right and it's a little bit shorter than the others, we could do possibly 1 or 2 a week. And I don't know if there's 10. I don't know if there's 10 tenets yet, Dave.
Oh.
We haven't figured that out yet. But anyway, so this episode is the art of communication. And I chose this and did a little bit of research about it because obviously I like Jordan Peterson. I've read his 12 Rules for Life, and it also relates to Stoicism as well. And people go, well, what's the problem with communication? Well, the only thing you have to look at nowadays is how the younger generation, Gen Z, whatever they're called, millennials, talk either in person, face to face, or on social media. Social media has made it acceptable for people to be abusive and not face any consequences as they would in face to face or personal confrontations. It's also introduced, well, certainly the use of mobile phones and technology has also introduced this lazy speak. And although it's more prominent in America, where you can see the influence through years of rap music in the black community, it's also prevalent on social media, where people don't seem to be able to even type a coherent sentence using basic King's English, and it's a problem. And what I think it's down to is because our attention spans are getting shorter due to social media, access to streaming TV, reality TV, and all this, that, and the other, all the distractions. So there's a lack of reading, there's a lack of writing because of the way we communicate now with electronic emails or text messaging, Facebook messaging, Instagram messaging, whatever, which also means there's a lack of critical thinking and a lack of thinking carefully about about the message that you're trying to get across. It seems to be lost, and so there's a lot more confusion. There's a lot more people being vague in what they're trying to get across. There's certainly a lack of people standing up for themselves and being strong in their own words due to it. This is how it relates to masculinity. It also means that if you can't be clear with other people, you're not being clear with yourself. So this is what Jordan Peterson says. I haven't established this by myself, but reading his books and watching his videos, he talks about if you can't clearly communicate what you want in life, whether it's through speech, through writing, then you can't define your goals in life. And if you can't define your goals in life, basically you're going to drift. Now, some people do it deliberately to say, well, I don't want to define my goal too much because there's the risk of failure. If I say that I want to be the strongest man in West Cumbria, that's a goal for me. But what happens if I bleat it out and I write it down and I tell everybody that that's what I do? Well, if I fail, then I look like an idiot. But if I don't specify it and I'll just say, well, I'm going to have a bit of a go and I'll see how I get on, and there's no risk of that sort of response to failure.
Yeah.
Although you failed, if I come last or whatever, you've still failed, but you're preparing yourself for the worst case scenario. And it's that sort of accountability that comes with being precise in your speech, in your communication, that's missing from modern day, and it's a problem. And I think that's why when you look at things like, there was a conservative Christian in America all this LGBTQ and trans kids, the push of trans kids and medical operations on kids to sort of give them what do you call it, testosterone blockers, and cut off testicles and cut off boobs of young girls who want to transition. There was a guy, a conservative Christian, who made a documentary, and he went around interviewing a lot of people who were pro. So he was interviewing doctors and university lecturers and things like that. And he kind of led them into a false sense of security with his interviewing techniques. And then all he said was, "What is a woman?" And they were like, "Well, anybody that identifies as a woman." And he says, "Yeah, but what are they identifying as?"
Bits of this, and they can't do it.
They can't answer. And it's like, well, if they're identifying as a woman, what are the qualities that they're identifying as? And they couldn't explain it. And obviously, the basic principle is it's that accepted that most folks struggle to sort of pin down what a woman is. Most normal thinking people, and obviously it's an adult human female, isn't it?
Yeah.
With XX chromosomes.
Yeah.
And but they just couldn't do it. And it's that type of thing. That's the grey areas that it leads into on the far end of the scale. So I just wanted to say a couple of things, a couple of sort of statistics that I had a quick look on the internet for. So 2015, 18% of 15-year-olds in England did not have the minimum level of literacy proficiency. Modern days, 46% of 16 to 24-year-olds don't read books. And low literacy levels cost the UK taxpayer 81 billion in lost earnings and obviously welfare support from the government. I mean, 81 billion, I'm assuming that's a year.
Well, so here's one for you on your first point. Yeah, about the literacy levels in kids. Yeah. Well, that's because the education system's pathetic, isn't it? And like, I think I was stuck in the education system for 30 odd years because I went through Lal school, then big school, then I went to sixth form. Did know, but I went now and then. Then I did a YTS where I worked in school. Then I went to college. Then I got a job in the school. So I've been in school like forever till I went full time with the coaching thing. And the education system's just honking. It's shit. Like all they're bothered about, all like the higher ups, the people at the top of the education system, all they give a fuck about is numbers, isn't it? Statistics like that. They'll want to improve that statistic.
Mm.
But they don't actually give a fuck about children, which is obviously like a problem with schools, isn't it? You've got to actually give a fuck about kids, and you've got to think about kids as human beings and not as word processors and calculators. So the pressure's so high because of all the bullshit that like the important parts of growing up and that you should do at school, like socialising with other kids and that's all lost. Like my mum worked in nursery forever, and like when they're 3 and a bit, she had to like assess what they can do in terms of writing and that. Shouldn't be able to write fuck all, should they? Should be still fucking in the sandpit and that, shouldn't they? But the problem is, and again, you look at the modern generation can be sometimes, and I'm not always, because I know loads of fucking great kids. I've got a gym full of brilliant kids, but I think they're awesome. And I'm proud of them all, like the way they behave in and out of the gym. You know, they're all great kids. But there's a lot of kids kicking about now that are very disrespectful, very rude. They're fucking awful, aren't they? A lot of them. You know, you see kids hanging about on street corners and that. The way they behave, they're all short of a clip, which they would have got back in the old days, wouldn't they? Yeah. But part of it is just because at school, they don't learn them important things. We talked about this on the ones back on your podcast originally, in like some of the Scandi countries and that. From what I've seen, their culture looks much nicer than ours. Like I'd rather live in Oslo than London. I've never been to Oslo and I haven't spent too much time in London, but I'd make that decision right now. But the culture just seems a lot nicer. Whenever I've met any of them Scandi lads that we know that have been over here, they've been great. Very polite and well mannered, which you don't always get over here, do you? Our culture is just shocking because kids aren't brought up. The importance is on reading and writing and maths, and not on how they treat other people, not on how they get on with other people. They're putting the cart before the fucking horse, aren't they? Kids will never engage in education until they behave in themselves. And that's the problem. Discipline is very, very lax. Kids are allowed to get away with murder. People in general are allowed to get away with fucking murder nowadays, aren't they?
Yeah. I think from an education point of view, it's like exactly what you said. It's all about statistics and not about the real functionality of being able to do those or apply those skills. And it's pretty evident now in modern England, this lack of ability to communicate, isn't it? And it's not just about, how many sort of fanciful words that we can use. It's not countdown. It's the art of communication. There's a little bit more to that. Obviously, one of the foundations is your ability to use it properly. But it's the fact that communication, obviously, he's an example. So I wanted to share this. So when I was at the gym in the Wolf Slayer 2006, a rift was starting to grow in between Bisping and a couple of the other lads, and I was with the other lads. And instead of approaching it like you should do, like a man, and saying and going right to the source, if there's a couple of years, you end up saying to each other, "Fucking hell, he's been a bit of a prick, isn't he?" And then it snowballs and escalates and escalates, and then it ends up with a huge fraction in the gym, and then it ends up with a gym meeting, and then it ends up with people being bitter and twisted, and it ends up with people leaving or being told to leave, and then it just becomes all fractured. Now, if that was dealt with right at the start, so if the problems are dealt with right at the start by the art of communication, you nip it right in the bud there, and then it doesn't grow. There's like an anecdotal kids book, isn't there, called Has anyone seen the dragon, or have you seen the size of this dragon? And it's dead basic, and it's broken down perfectly, but it's written in like a kids book format style, and it's this dragon that appears in this family the size of a cat, and every day it gets bigger and bigger until like the dad goes out to work, the son goes off to school, and the dragon's that big, picks up the house and runs off. So when the kid comes back from school, the dad comes back from work, the house has disappeared, and it's like, well, the problem ignored has just exploded into this sort of even bigger monumental problem, and like obviously, if you read Jordan Peterson's books,
Yeah, I always thought all the books on your back shelf were really intellectual. I didn't realize they were all kids' books.
That's my level of reading and writing, Dave. So it goes back to that as well. It's being strong in your communication. It's not just about your sort of ability level, and being precise in your speech is something that the Stoics taught as well. If anybody's interested, if you want to get into sort of like a beginner's course of Stoicism, there's the Art of Manliness podcast with a guy called Donald Robertson, and he wrote a book called How to Think Like a Roman Emperor. And he's just like a psychologist, but he bases his diagnosis and his techniques on the principles of Marcus Aurelius's meditations. And in that, and on the podcast, he talks about how the Stoics, the Greek Stoics, would promote sort of precise speech. And it's like they do away with catastrophizing. Like, for example, let's think of a quick example. My boss told me off today at work. He made me look like a fucking idiot in front of 10 people. Well, if you break it down to so many levels, what did he actually do? Did he just pull you up on a point that you weren't clear on, and you've internalized it, and then you've sort of embellished it and catastrophized it? Was it just the fact that he wanted you to be clear in what you were explaining, and was that it? But now, we get sensationalists, don't we? Oh, bloody hell, did you see what happened? Because it creates like this
drama, and people love drama.
Yeah. And so the Stoics were big on keeping things concise and to the point. Marcus Aurelius was obviously a Stoic, wasn't he? He had a grandfather who was his adopted grandfather, Hadrian, the Hadrian's Wall.
Yeah.
Who was what they called a sophist, and they were into very flamboyant, poetic speeches and ways of communicating with each other, like rhetorician type. And he was like, even though he'd been brought up around him and stuff, his attitude was no, you need to keep it simple and to the point. And it was kind of what do you call it? It was kind of adopted from the Spartans, because they were of the same.
Weren't they?
Pardon?
Laconical, weren't they?
Yeah,
that was the word, wasn't it? Yeah.
because Laconia is obviously the spotting.
Yeah, explain to the viewers, because I know we both know this, but go on.
So what Laconic is?
Yeah.
So Laconic is obviously a term for being precise in your speech and not using flamboyant words and being direct and to the point. And that was the language that the Spartans used, and it was based on the fact that there's a town in Sparta called Laconia, and the Stoics adopted that, and that was their philosophy. We communicate directly and do away without the catastrophe or embellishment of speech.
The best example of it I've heard, the being laconical or laconical, was Leonidas, isn't it? I don't know how right it is, but apparently, in his Thermopylae, the all 300 beat and all the Persians are there. Apparently, I think the last thing that got said before the battle, the Persians said, like, lay down, you've got one last chance to lay down your arms. And apparently he said, obviously in Spartan or Greek, come and take them. How Clint Eastwood is that? That's brilliant, isn't it? How toxically masculine was that? Clear and concise, that's what you're on about, wasn't it? But also just like inviting a massive game of cock conquers to the death, wasn't it?
Well, there's the other one, isn't there? Is it Philip of Macedonia? I think it was Alexander the Great's dad.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Sent a letter to Sparta saying, if you, I can't, I'm obviously going to butcher this because I can't remember what the topic was that he'd asked the Spartans to do, but essentially it was, if you carry on doing what you're doing, then we will invade. And I think the Spartans responded with "if," quotation marks.
Great, no fucks given,
Yeah.
And that's what part of that is what we're saying we need a bit of now, isn't it? When you're communicating a bit of that standing your ground, isn't it? Here's another quote: "To say the words he truly feels, or to say the things he truly feels, and not the words of one who kneels." That's from My Way by Frank Sinatra, isn't it? And that's the same tack, isn't it? There's a lot of people now who won't open their mouth. It's been nice because we've actually had a bit of praise from a few people on this, because we're opening our mouths, aren't we? And saying our two pence worth. And I think sometimes it is important to do that, isn't it? Obviously, I would think that because I'm a gobshite. But yeah, I think now you don't see many people. And again, like, in workplaces especially, I know no one can really talk much about work now, can they? Because they'll just fucking sack you. But I know in the education system, there's things that you can't say, that are frowned upon, that'll go down like a lead balloon. Opinions that you can't give. I'm sure it's exactly the same in every major employer in West Cumbria and the world. So, like, being, like, honest and forthright isn't always rewarded anymore, is it? Once over, that was seen as a good thing, wasn't it? Just, calling a spade, saying what you thought, no fucking about, like you're saying about down at the Wolfie. If you'd always put your cards on the table, right, this is how it is, it would have probably all went off smoother, wouldn't it, one way or another? Yeah, you regret that now, don't you? Now that you're stuck up here talking shite with me on here. Could have been big time in UFC, old Mike. And this is what you've done instead. Look what you could have had.
I'd much rather be doing this for a living, David. Trust me.
You would.
Well, here it's become that foreign now. This direct speech and this counter narrative against the modern don't even know what you call it, the modern culture, the modern horse shit, that you're regarded as a threat to society in some places if you have a counter narrative. But all it is going back 10, 20, 30 years, 40 years.
Yeah.
But you'd be considered a heretic to the modern, the modern whatever we worship at the moment.
Granddad's opinions would have been. You know what I mean? Like, yours would be very much like your dad's would have been, aren't they? You know, on a lot of things, on a lot of the current issues now. Our views would be seen as old fashioned, wouldn't they? Sometimes I say, when Rebecca just laughs and shakes her head at us. Do you know what I mean? It's like in her head, she's thinking like, "Oh, you silly old fucker." Like, you know, you are from another generation, which we are, aren't we? Better one.
So going back to the skill set of being able to read, write, and speak. Think about what the positives are for if you can do that well, and you've got strength in your convictions, and you can just to go off on a quick tangent. We talk about toxic masculinity, and immediately people think about it's all about being physically tough and being able to fight and this, that, and the other. Well, you think about the leaders over time who have been great orators and being able to lead countries, populations to war and whatever else and success. And perfect example. You know what I've got to say, don't you? And I'm not saying it's right, but his ability to communicate with his country and to touch on 1,000 millions of people's consciences. He led them blindly into chaos and war, but it just shows you the strength. And could he fight? He was about fucking 3 stone wet through, wasn't he? He was a vegetarian.
But he couldn't have fought asleep.
And it was the same for Marcus Aurelius. He was a sickly man because of his ability to sort of rouse the troops and his ability to stick to his word. He led the Roman army through loads of trouble and strife and wars on the mark into Germania. And he led them through. There was plagues and all kinds when he was in charge, but he managed to keep the people on side. He managed to keep the troops on side. His generals worshipped him. And it was basically because of it wasn't because he went and fought in the war. It was basically his ability to communicate properly. So you don't have to be a tough guy to be,
Napoleon, I don't think Napoleon was like great in an actual scrap, but he was a genius, wasn't he? Massively charismatic. There's that story, isn't there, when he sort of went, because he had 2 goes at the job, didn't he? And he roused his sort of peasant army and they robbed him through the country. And obviously, whoever was in charge sent an army to stop them. And he walked out in between the two armies, and he said to them, "Go on then, kill your emperor." And they all just joined him. Again, like, that's a massive set of balls, isn't it? That's as masculine as he comes, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly.
But again, he was little. He wasn't much of a scrapper, but he had like that fucking big balls, didn't he? He was awesome. Alfred the Great was another sickly guy though as well, wasn't he?
Was he?
Yeah. He was always badly with belly and whatnot, and feeble type. But again, did great things through strength of character. And again, because that's what people miss as well when you talk about like the toxic masculinity thing and that. And no doubt the word strength's going to come up with it, isn't it? There's a lot more to strength than just big muscles and lifting heavy weights and being good at fighting, isn't there?
Exactly.
Strength, that's what's more important, isn't it? In the gym, that's when I get kids in the gym, that's my biggest priority. And again, when you go back to what we were talking about before, about the way kids grow up now, sure the kids in the gym are all really polite and that. And again, they've all got good character. And if they didn't, I wouldn't want them in the gym. They'd either have to change or go. Because you wouldn't want your characters in there around all the good kids.
Well, yeah. Then, so what's the positives of being able to do all this properly? Well, we kind of touched on it. Obviously, you don't want to lead a country to war, or or start killing a certain race of people. But imagine if you're a person, just just imagine this in your mind's eye. Imagine if you're a person who's just constantly saying yes to people. And inside, every time you say yes and you don't challenge, a little bit of your soul just gets eaten away and you become weak and passive. Well, imagine that one day you just turn around and you start saying no and then speaking your mind, and then your confidence grows. And all of a sudden, people are like, what do you mean? They get shocked because they're expecting you just to be completely passive and give in. And all of a sudden, people start looking at you with different eyes. You start to rise up the competence hierarchy. Your confidence grows. You become more confident. You can communicate better, and all of a sudden you're rising up, and then you become someone not to be taken lightly because you took that first step of saying no.
Yeah.
And that's all it takes to be toxic masculine.
The attitude goes a long way, doesn't it?
Yeah. So look, become articulate. So that's a great weapon in your armory. If you can become articulate, you can argue, you can negotiate. The art of negotiation, obviously, is to kind of get what you want, but you don't want the other person to go away feeling aggrieved. So you can learn to do that. People understand your instructions. You understand your own instructions. You make clear what your goals are, what you're asking for to other people and to yourself. You can think critically. So it's not like you're just blindly led. So, while all this shit's going on and people are just like, yes, please inject me one more time, you can take a step back and go, right, what's happening here? What will 99% survival rate, and yet they're asking us to get 4 shots to survive. Something wrong there. You can control your emotions, which is great. No man should be an emotional wreck, flying off the handle or crying or
No.
rising to every bait that gets cast in the sea. Your confidence grows. People will start listening to you. People will start respecting you, and then obviously you start to rise up the critical hierarchy, competence hierarchy. And that's all I had. I got a couple of quotes I wanted to read just to finish off with. I know it's not as a controversial podcast as our previous ones, but
Well, I've still got my update of news from around the world.
oh well, that's probably the icing on the cake, isn't it? So if I can just finish off with these, then I'll hand over to you, Dave.
Are you quoting?
So, 12 Rules for Life, Jordan Peterson. Recommend it to anybody who's got a bit of an interest.
With lots of notes by the looks of it.
Yeah, bit of a nerd, aren't I? Well, pencil markings in the margins and that. So here we go. So Rule 10, be precise in your speech. So it's kind of summarising better what I've already said earlier on. So when things break down, what has been ignored rushes in. When things are no longer specified with precision, the walls crumble and chaos makes itself known. And that's the last thing you need. When we've been careless and let things slide, what we have refused to attend to gathers itself up, adopts a serpentine form, and strikes, often at the worst possible moment. It is then that we see what focused intent, precision of aim, and careful attention protects us from. So that's kind of beautifully summed up what I was trying to say before. So maybe I need to work on my precision.
He's very eloquent, Paul Jordan Peterson.
He's absolutely fantastic. I mean, he's
brilliant to listen to.
Yeah, isn't he just?
Yeah.
What remains vague when it renders life stagnant and murky? Well, if you don't know who you are, you can hide in doubt. Maybe you're not a bad, careless, worthless person. Who knows? Not you. Particularly if you refuse to think about it and you have every reason not to. But not thinking about something you don't want to know doesn't make it go away. You are merely trading specific, particular, pointed knowledge of that likely finite list of your real faults and flaws for a much longer list of undefined potential inadequacies and insufficiencies. So there we go. So that's about being precise in your goal and putting off the fact that you will fail, or trying to hide the fact that you'll fail. Here's that other book I mentioned earlier, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor by Donald Robertson. I actually had this guy on the podcast years and years ago, and I interviewed him. And in his house, he was getting work done, And he didn't realise I could hear what the workmen were doing, but it was like a drill going off every like 30 seconds. And it just ruined the full thing. So I couldn't even publish it. So there's a chapter on how to speak wisely, sorry. So on page 169, Marcus tells himself that true philosophy is both simple and modest, and we should never be seduced into vanity or ostentation in this regard. Always take the shortest route, he says, and then references a quote from the Meditations. The short way is the way of nature, which leads to the soundest words and actions. Simplicity frees us from affectation and the trouble it brings. For the Stoics, this honesty and simplicity of language requires two main things: conciseness and objectivity. So that was like what I was saying before about how your boss would maybe you think he would call you out, but in reality, he was just saying, can you be a bit more clear in what you're trying to say? It would be an oversimplification to say that this just means stop complaining, but in many cases, the Stoics did advise along those lines. And the last one, boring every fucker to tears. Boring both people to tears here.
Your mum and my mum wouldn't know what we're talking about.
You know, somebody from work said they watch it, and I was like, oh, fucking hell. I was like, oh, great, but at the same time, I've got to be careful what I'm saying. Marcus likewise told himself to speak plainly rather than dressing up his thoughts in fancy language. Indeed, nothing is so conducive to the greatness of mind, he said, as the ability to examine events rationally and view them realistically by stripping them down to their essential characteristics in this way. So, just a couple of quotes from a couple of books, but it kind of all makes sense to the art of communication, which we should all try and improve on, and be strong in your communication with others. If you don't think something's right, just fucking say it. You don't have to be rude about it. Simple no, or like the Spartan said, if. One word, two letters. Fucking great.
So do we know what the next key part of masculinity is going to be for the next podcast?
No, I'll have a think.
So, right then, well, on with me news from around the world. So on the last episode, I brought you the terrifying news of killer whales attacking boats in the Mediterranean. And so I'm sure a lot of people out there have seen that I can't remember the name of the place, but in Egypt, that fella's just been attacked and ate by that tiger shark, hasn't he? Did you see it? The video's fucking horrific. It's like the first scene of Jaws. Well, that's what I was getting, like plunging out of the water and that. I always thought when like a big shark eating, it's just like, when you see a great white, like boom. But not with a tiger shark. Now they just fucking chomp you up and drag you under than that. So, but here's another thing. So this just ties in. It's a very, very vague, tenuous link. But the Red Sea by Egypt obviously isn't very far at all from the Med, is it? One of the reasons that apparently the Mediterranean killer whales attack on boats is because of overfishing. Guess what? One of the reasons that some shark expert give for the tiger shark attack on some of these swimming pools? Overfishing.
Wow.
So, do you know what? It's maybe something that you'll see more of. But more importantly, and this is even scarier, even darker news, than nature turning against man, eating us from the depths. Skynet is upon us, like on Terminator 2. That's maybe a bit light-hearted and a bit of a joke, but there was, I don't know if you've seen this, Alex, there was like a flight sim thing the other day, like a military simulator, like an artificial intelligence thing, like an artificial intelligence drone. And it's all just like a simulator. Obviously, no real people got hurt. I'll just point that out. But when this guy gave this AI drone like instructions to do something that wasn't going to be for the good of itself or what it's seen as the cause, it killed the operator just in the game. But that's got to be fucking scary, hasn't it? Like, this is something that, like, obviously governments and that are playing with this shit now, aren't they? We're going to have these so they're testing these artificial intelligence drones in like simulations. And in this simulation, Lado's obviously thought, oh, right, the drone, the artificial intelligence drone has obviously thought, fuck this ain't going to work for the plan. and just killed its operator. Then after that, right, they did a thing like they put into like the sort of programming in, you cannot kill the operator, like you'd have to fucking program that in. Or like somebody fucking forgot to program that in the first spot, the fucking idiots. Did you put the don't kill people order in the drone? No. So they did that, and then it just did other things like, you know, to sort. I think like it knocked out the comms tower, so they couldn't communicate with it and tell it what to do. And this is what people are thinking about letting run the world. And you know, honestly, I laughed and I said Skynet is upon us, but it's not a million miles away, that is it. If you think, if you start, because again, we've got, not only have we got fucking AI drones that are going to be flying around in the skies, but we've got like Robocop in Times Square and Grand Central Station, haven't we? There's robot police, fucking robots. And I don't think they've actually got any powers yet, but how long till they've got tasers and that? It won't be forever, mate, will it? And again, it'll be around, they're artificially intelligent, aren't they? What happens when they think, fuck you, we're the boss? You're making shit decisions, we're making better ones. What happens when they think that? So there you go.
I'll tell you what's scary. Well, it's when they start being able to rebuild each other.
Yeah.
Because they'll run out of fucking energy before long. I mean, let's say one went rogue, a drone. It's only got so much fucking petrol in the tank or energy in the battery.
Yeah.
What happens when they start to realise they can park up at BP garage and recharge themselves? What the fuck's anybody got to do then?
What about when they start communicating with each other?
Yeah, we're fucked.
Yeah. And let's be honest, we can be as stoic as we want. We're going to do fuck all about them drones, is he? And on that note, that concludes episode 9 of the podcast. See you very soon for episode 10. And although no one ever watches this far, if you do, please like and subscribe and make us rich off YouTube.
Boom.